Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining me today as I'm unpacking this. I mean, I looked at it, of course, ahead of time. I've been working on these APRs for about over the course of 30 years now. Wow. Then just got through with SSS APRs and now shifting over to UBMS. So what I'm going to be doing is basically unpacking, going through the major documents, answering any questions that come up as we go along. This is a time for you all to ask your questions. And also I'm getting chat, so you should be able to chat. You can also post questions anonymously. I'll have I think Ms. Fleming will be joining me in a second to act as my moderator, so she can also look to see if there are any questions going on. Ms. Fleming, when you get on, if you could raise your hand and I can add you as a co-host, and then you can also help me with some of these questions that come up. So I'm hoping that we have a lot of questions from y'all after I give my introduction and kind of unpacking the report. Sometimes when you are forced, like I'm forcing myself or have forced myself to go through all the documents, I find out things that, oh, that's interesting. I bet I'll need that later. So I'm going to take you through a deep dive of that. Let me make sure I don't have any more chats then. How do we access the APR? I'm a new director. I haven't received any instructions from the Department of Ed. Well, welcome. Isn't that the way it usually is? Now, let me start with that, with the letter. And then if you can hang on, and if you want to also send me a chat your email address, and I can meet with you separately if by the end of the workshop, you're still not clear as to where you actually go to get that letter. The department has to know that you're the director, but we can get you onto the site. I'll show you here in a second here, so that you can actually go ahead and request that information. You want to get started on that. It doesn't mean you can't be working on your APR anyway. It just means that, now's the time to get into the process of making sure the department knows that you're the director, okay? Or there's been a switch in directors. But great question. All right, so let me start with you're welcome, and send me your email. Again, if we don't answer your questions, anybody, you can put in the chat your email address, or you can send me an email. Actually, what I'll do right now before I get started is, just in case, I'm going to send this to everybody. Here is the link, because sometimes people don't get the Zoom reminders or the follow-up emails. But here is the link to the Dropbox, not the Dropbox, Lisa, the Google Drive, where I have uploaded 2 folders. The first folder has all the APR documents that we're going to review, or that we were able to download without going onto the website. This was on the Department of Ed's Upward Bound under the performance link, all these documents. And then I just put, just in case, just for convenience, if you are utilizing Blumen, I did a separate webinar on that last week, and these are the same documents here. So I just put it in one, and I just copy and pasted here, so you wouldn't have to go into 2 separate folders. But this webinar will concentrate on solely the instructions, the documents that were pertain to, anyone, would help anyone utilizing any database, even if it's homemade. So when you go into that folder in the Google Drive, these are the documents that I downloaded for you. You could have done it on your own. You probably already have, but just in case you haven't, here they are, right? So I'm going to start with the very first one, the letter. Okay, so let me share that. Oh, no, I don't want to share my emails, right? Okay, so let me go into the letter and I will share that with you. All right, let me turn off my video here for a second. Well, this is fine, yeah. All right, so I wanted to point out that this has come up a lot. This APR, and it's confusing because we just had to do an IPR, an interim performance report, which is unusual, except for if it was a brand new Upward Bound program or a brand new McNair program. Anybody who is in their brand new very first year of funding, we are used to being asked in the middle of the year to give an interim performance report. But this time around, they asked everybody to do it. So they told you, forget about, last year, 21-22. We want to know what's going on now in 22-23. All right. So that's done. Now you're being asked to shift back to 21-22. It's like, you know what? I got what I needed for the current year. Now I want you to think about last year. And last year was the last year, for those of you who are in existence, of course, probably everybody here, otherwise you wouldn't be attending an APR workshop. You were in your last year of funding. So this is about your old objective percentages, your old CPPs, right? Not about what's going on now or starting in 22-23. Sounds easy, but when it's so late in the year where you're working on this, I mean, think about it. You're working on this now toward the end of the school year of 22-23, and you're having to remember what was going on in 21-22. Very, very annoying. Yes, I get it. So just to make sure we're on the same page on the timing, this is about the last year's funding. So whenever they ask a question about, what's the current student's grade level, then you know that that's going to be difficult. Oh, it's not? Okay, let's see here. When you click that link that I just posted, Miss Fleming's here. I'm going to actually have her help me out here with everything. Let me see. Hello, Ms. Fleming, how are you? And I'm going to—
Hey there, you want me to check the link?
Yes, could you check the link that I put in the chat? And also, if you get a chance, can you go back into the, and let me know if you have that link, because I thought I copied it from the link to the Google Drive just before we logged on.
Okay, you just want me to check the link? Okay, will do.
Yeah. Let me see, it should take us to the Google Drive. Okay, anyway, I'll get that to you. All right, back to this letter here. All right, so again, and we know the due date. All right, so there is on the website, there is a way where you can, once you get through right before you hit the final submission, you'll be able to look at your APR results, a preview of your APR results. It's the last year, the last funding cycle. So I know there's no prior experience points in the running, but get yourself used to, or train yourself to please check that before you submit, because sometimes we put the wrong answers, even though they get through they're not missing answers. They're not inconsistent answers, but maybe we misunderstood or we read the question wrong. This has happened to a couple of my clients that answered no when they should have been answering yes. And so no database or even the Department of Ed didn't know it was an error because it wasn't an inconsistent answer or a missing answer. They just, the person doing the report misunderstood the question or selected no instead of yes. Had they looked at this PE point preview, they would have noticed, oh no, what's going on here? Let me go back and see my answer. It'll tell you where the answer is coming from, and you're able to do that and correct it before you submit. Most database programs, I know Student Access and Bloomin, do have a way where you can actually do that more internal before you even get to the website. Now, if there's an issue, if you have submitted it and realize, oh my gosh, I did an error or I forgot something, you can do that. You can go ahead and unsubmit, but you got to do it no later than the due date, right? That makes sense. And also remember that you have 5 days, business days after the final submission of your completed online APR report to get that signature page. So you need to let your, don't wait until the last day to do it. Get the signature page unless you're ready to get that signature page right away. So that signature page also needs to be submitted before the due date. Okay. So let's see what we got here, Ms. Fleming. Is it working?
Yes, it's working. Thanks, Randy, for dropping that link. It's working.
Okay, so I had the wrong link. Interesting.
It was the registration link.
That's weird because I have, okay, gotcha. Whatever. So sorry, y'all. Thank you. Thanks, Randy. All right. So contents of section 1. All right. So when you log on to the website, you'll have a part 1 that you can look at. And the part 1 here will cover basically the certification, identification, warning. It'll be pre-populated. That's why they want to confirm you're the project director, so that the majority of the information there is already plugged in for you to confirm, double check, make sure it's correct. Part 2 is about your competitive preference priorities, and that's the old ones, not the new ones. So the last year of the grant, think about if you can remember those old competitive preference priorities. They're going to ask how many students received those, participated in any of those activities, and 300-word or less narrative about basically summarizing what they received in regarding to those competitive preference priorities. I strongly recommend that you work on that, either if you've been around during the last funding cycle or the last year. Hopefully you saved maybe a Word document that you worked on to submit your answer for 2021. And if you save that in Word off the website, then save as, and updated as needed for 21-22. If you're brand new to the game, and you don't know where that document is, I would recommend that you create a new Word document and that you answer the questions as to how many students received each CPP and how they received it. Check that out for the, make it look as nice as you want it to look. It's no more than 300 words each. Save as, so that when you finally get to the website, you can copy and paste. Because I've done it where I've tried to do it within the actual online space, and it was, it would time me out, and that would be so frustrating. At one point, I just wanted to cry because I'd worked so hard on it. So I learned my lesson. I said, never again. So work on that offline. Also, the great part is that you can save it and use it. Well, you can't use it anymore, but you can use the format, because starting this year, we're going to have new CPPs. Now, part 3 is only for those folks that had the supplemental funding that they received. And that would have been in 2018-19, but I don't know if they're talking about if you had any funds that were left over. Not too many folks, I think, have received that supplemental funding or still utilized it during the 21-22 year. And then part 4 is about the target schools. All right. So not everyone will have to do part 3, but everyone will have to do part 1, part 2, and part 4. All right. So most of you out there have an existing program, but if your program is really, really old, guess what? They're not going to be asking about students beyond a certain, I guess when they started the post-secondary cohort. So don't be surprised they don't ask about that, or hoping you want to not be asked about that. So, really those that were in the 2007, 2012 cycle, I'm going to highlight that again. If y'all were around then and had students that went to college during that cycle, they're not going to be asking about them anymore. Okay. And that shouldn't be any shock to you because you haven't been serving them, of course, and maybe tracking them. Now, this is very, very important. Your seniors, all your students are important, of course, but reporting purposes toward the objectives. When we talk about that post-secondary enrollment objective for last year's seniors, and then for students, prior year students that had graduated, in the past, 6 years ago and went to college, it's very, very important, right, that 6 years later you'll be asked about them. So that means with last year's seniors, you have to make sure that their high school graduation and their post-secondary enrollment dates are correct if you want them included in the 2022 cohort, right? If they are not placed correctly in that cohort, then you will not get credit 6 years later if they receive an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. So they have to be coded correctly now, all right? Once they accept your APR, you can't add any more students to the 2022 post-secondary education enrollment cohort. All right. And I think everybody out there has come across one time or another where for whatever reason, they should have put yes, that they went and put 2022, or there was some confusion, and then realized after the fact, oh my God, they really did go to college in the fall of 2022. Can I put them on there now? Well, no, not after it's turned in, unless you find that error and correct it before, the due date. All right. Anybody out there with June and July start dates, you also must provide post-secondary enrollment data on this APR. Okay. For students served in summer of 2022, even though summer 2022 is part of 22-23. Is that confusing or what? So anyone out there with a June, July start date, you need to include those seniors in there, okay? Even though you're technically thinking, wait a minute, isn't that part of 22-23? Yes and no, but you want to make sure on this APR that those graduated seniors go by when they graduated. Whether you start in June or September, these students usually graduate at the same time. And they're expected to go to college based on the objective at the same time, in the fall, immediately after their high school graduation in the spring. Also, on the COE APR training, they noted that we could not count dual enrollment or associates from our seniors. Is that the same? I know what they're saying. When students, for those of you that have dual enrolled students, right? Like think about your seniors right now, and they're dual enrolled. They're seniors and they're also in college. When we talk about that, when we answer when or on the APR, when we answer that question regarding when was a student's first college enrollment date, we can't put when they actually first started as a dual enrollment student. What we have to do is put a date that occurred after their high school graduation. So that question really is upon, when you tell the department on the APR, you know what, I have 10 seniors, 5 of them are dual enrolled. Well, then I would say, well, you know what, when you answer that date as to when they're going to start college, I'm not going to put when they were a junior or sophomore in high school. I'm going to put that fall where after they actually graduate. That's the date. I know a client had done that earlier, and I think you know who you are, right? We just talked about this yesterday, where they were dual enrolled, and so they were doing it the right way. They were saying, well, she started college in the middle of her junior year, so I'm going to put that in. So she's cool, right? But I'm getting an error message. I said, yeah, you're getting an error message because they don't want you to put the date of when they started while they're in high school. They want you to put the first date of college after high school graduation. So that should be the answer to that question. How would you mark that on the APR? Would you just answer yes to the question? Well, you would answer yes. You would say, did they get an associate's degree or, nowhere there. I mean, it does ask, did the student get a bachelor's degree, but it also asks, did the student get a certificate? Did the student get an associate's degree? Did the student get a bachelor's degree toward the end? Okay, we'll check those questions out. Hopefully we'll have time to go ahead and look at that. Great questions, y'all. All right, so again, we're going to look at this here, the help desk. So those are the major things that I wanted to point out from that letter.
We did have another. Oh, okay. You say it.
Thank you. Thank you. I've reviewed some students that have a long list of post-secondary enrollment in the National Student Clearinghouse, but the transcript doesn't have an AA or BA. Short of trying to reach out to the cohort of 2016 students, how have others gone about this? Okay, so we'll talk about that. If y'all want to chime in, by all means, this is going to us. Colleen, if you're okay with it, I'm going to copy this and I'm going to put it out there to chat, because I think you might have meant to send it to everyone to get their feedback. And then remind me, Ms. Fleming, if we've got time, we can talk about basically tracking, right? And again, clearinghouse is not perfect. But I'm going to sound like a grandmother here. Remember your grandmother used to say, well, I used to walk this, or I used to have to do this. Hey, I've been around in Truro since before clearinghouse. And we would have to try to, and social media and all that stuff, we'd have to like send letters out to financial aid office. That's when they would talk to us. Now they're like, who are you? We don't want to talk to you. So if you're trying to track students, there's a section in your proposal in the plan of operation, the very last question, where they ask, how are you going to track these students? What methods are you utilizing? Now, regulation speaking, what counts as verification? Self-reported still counts. I mean, I prefer third-party verification, which means either clearinghouse or from an SSS program that I'm working with that's at that school, or, asking the student to text me a picture of their schedule or their student ID, if I can do that, or verbally, I mean, that's my last choice. But self-reported, trying to track them down, reach out to them. Again, these are things where you might want to focus on having making sure that students, while they're with you, understand that, look, we're going to put you in this alumni group. We're going to try to keep you all together, and you act like it's a social thing so that the classes, even after they go off to college, there's some way now, maybe a website where you have a different, just like you're a high school and there's the class of this, and you try to maybe through LinkedIn, maintain communication with them. If you were a talent search program, I'd tell you to handle it differently. We couldn't do that with all our talent search graduates because we have hundreds every year. Yeah, or clearinghouse, ask for proof, send a cohort card that says, congratulations, thank you from UB. Yes, so all those ideas there. Bottom line is, if I can get grandma on the phone and she tells me that her baby is going to college someplace, I will accept that. I will document it and write it down. They probably don't know what kind of degree they have, but that's the fun of Upward Bound, is trying to reach out and find out. I'm just here to tell you that third-party verification, although it's preferred by most right now, regulation speaking, self-reported or parent or student letting you know, or parent or relative telling you that they've graduated, is, as long as you documented that you spoke to someone, the time and date, and you spoke to them, it's not the best, but it's still something. Hopefully the majority of your the majority of your verification can come from Clearinghouse or some third party source. Okay. All right. So moving on, let's look at the other form, which would be the, well, there's instructions. There's 33 pages of instruction. I'm not going to copy that or go into that. Thank you, Ms. Fleming. Okay, so let's go here and let's look at the format. So again, once you go to the website and you're able to log in, the first section you'll see on here, and it looks, I wish I had a screenshot, but you know, it obviously won't look like this. It'll look like a website. But section 1, after you get in and do your password, which is so annoying, you have to do that every year, will look similar to this, where it will be pre-populated with the project's name, the award number. Make sure if you have multiple upward bound projects, make sure that you're, you know, we used to have several of them. So you want to make sure you're working the right one, so that your data doesn't get, you know, mixed up. It'll ask for the project director's name, should be pre-populated. Those of you that are new, it might take a minute. That's why you want to go ahead and start the process. Either contact your, I think when you go online and it says if you're the project director or not, that will trigger some conversation if it hasn't already occurred. You can be proactive and go ahead and email your program officer right now, and they may just say, well, you know what, just go to the website and put in, you know, that, that you're not the director, a register. That'll trigger me to do something on my end, or they may be able to help you right away, or call the help desk and describe your situation and see what they think the best route, the quickest thing to do. The good news is that, you know, you're not doing this the day before it's due. So you have some time there. Again, there's some questions about UBMS, project characteristics. I just want to know if you have a summer residential component, yes or no, which is not required, but they just want to know. They're gathering a bunch of information. You will soon realize that the majority of the APR questions are information that have nothing to do with your objectives. They are collecting data for some sort of long-term study, but the majority of the fields, you know, we've got what, 66 fields. The majority of them are not utilized to calculate whether or not you've met your objectives or your PE points or anything like that. Let me see what we have here. We have,
Yeah, that's just a question about what website do we go to for G5?
well, not to G5, it's the website for the department. So for the APR, is that what you're talking about? And that would look like, where do I have it here? Let me see here. The website, I had it up here a second ago. Trio, let me share this. This is what I mean here. This is the website, right?
Right.
This is
and
you
thanks,
go.
Alexandra dropped it in the chat, trio.ed.gov.
Yes, and then you go
that's
down
what it
here.
looks like. Make
Yeah,
sure you
this is
have
what it
your PO number handy. Make sure you have your PO number handy. So, because that's one of the first things they ask for when you log in.
Yeah, and so it's separate from G5. Okay, now your program officer may have to go to G5 to change the director's name, but they have to do that, and then that'll let you get in here. Okay, so the instructions are down here as well. So this is where you go initially. So the first thing you want to do is, you know, first of all, you know, download the instructions, have them handy just in case here. I'm taking you through the format. So when you log on to that website, you will get to, let's see here. Oh, wrong one. Wrong set of forms. Let's see here, form. Okay. All right. So this is section 1. I think it's okay. All right. So let me scroll down here. Sorry. I'm going to get to the warning, and this is about your competitive preference priorities, if applicable. Can you believe it? Some people did not do any in the last competition or last, 5 years. But if you did, like most of us did, here's where you have to, and this is the last year where they wanted the study and all that crazy stuff here. We don't have to do that anymore, but now they want actually the citation of the study utilized. Okay. And then briefly speak about the implementation. So hopefully you saved from last time, you saved that information, then you can copy and paste here. And here they just want, actually, you know what, implementation, please cover these issues here. So you would have to do that. I'm trying to figure out how you would do that in 45 words or not. Please indicate, yes, you did that. Okay, and so then you would have to go ahead and briefly discuss, very briefly, has any of these things happened? I would use you know what? I would take these 3 sentences, these 3 things that they want, I would give them 3 sentences. You would say no or yes, no staff training. The plan utilized, we utilize the plan as spelled out in the detailed CPP document. And we were in the middle of it, or we wrapped it up, we conducted that, and the number of students that received that service. Okay, and so that's why you want to make sure you track that. Okay.
You
All
do
right.
have a question here. Can we find that information in last year's grant application? I'm new, so I'm not sure where to start.
Yes, and if anyone out there has looked at last year's PDF, I believe, if I'm referring to where I looked at the SSS ones that we just did. The SSS reports that we just submitted, on those PDFs of the SSS report, we were able to see the responses there. Hopefully somewhere someone kept a Word document that had it. If not, you could copy and paste and recreate it. So here is the, okay, so here's the question. So yes, usually the CPPs, or the way you handle them, don't change from year to year. Section 3 is about supplemental funding. I don't know if any of y'all utilize supplemental funding, but here's where they want you to tell them about that. Some of y'all may not have to answer this at all because you didn't do that. Again, you may want to look at last year's APR to see if that was the case. And then again, if you have, let's see here, if you have any funding, yes. So, okay, this is the thing. Did you get approval? So due to the COVID pandemic, some projects were not able to complete work plan. So, you may have gotten supplemental funding back when everyone got it, but if you utilized it all before 21, 22, then you don't have to answer this. Okay. So Ms. Fleming, you're taking care of that chat, right? I don't need to.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, great. So I'm going to keep going on. All right. So, hopefully you've used that money. Here is section 4 on information on target schools. All right. What's a target school? That is the focus of your services. Okay. This means that the majority of your identification, recruitment, and delivery of services occurs at those target schools. So their rationale is we want to know a little bit more about those target schools. All right. Please, so you only want to include the official target schools. A lot of us are at other schools that we may have ended up recruiting or following kids, that used to be at a target school and not at another target school. But I would recommend you only put the target schools that were listed on your proposal, or if you have received approval from the department during the funding cycle, to include them. Right. So here we want to put information on your target schools. So they want to know the name of the school, the state, the NCES ID number, which you can go to that website if you don't already know it, and they have one for each school. Was it listed on your grant application, and number of students served in the reporting period? Okay. And then they want to know how many students were served attending the target schools. So where do you put students that weren't? Because we all have students that weren't attending the target school. Maybe, because they started at a target school, but now they're not at that target school anymore. Okay. So this is where you would put the number. Excuse me. This is where you would have the difference. If you have a difference, some of us stick to the target schools and maybe have an internal rule or policy that we say, look, if you're not attending our target school, we can't work with you anymore, but I have to track you. Or case by case, well, you're not going to our school anymore, but if you can come to me, you can come to us during after school or the summer, and you're still in the same general area, that's a case by case. So you see, not all your students have to be at your target schools, but you don't want to, when somebody's brand new, you want to keep from selecting anybody from the get-go that doesn't go to your target school, because one of the questions on the APR that they force you to answer for every single new student is, which target school did they start at? And they only, on that pull down menu you should only be able to select your target schools. Now, after their first year, if they go to another target school, that's fine. Notice the department will never ask until you get here on the APR, they never ask, is that student still at the same target school? Or what is the name of the target school that they're at this year? It's only when they first started. So they understand that, students may leave you. So that's the difference there. Okay. So, you may get a pop-up window, well, it says here, the number of participants served who attended a target school, plus the number of participants served who did not attend a target school at all during the reporting period must equal the number of new continuing reentry and transfer students. That makes sense, right? So if you're claiming to serve 60, I've got 40 at the target schools and 20 at the non-target schools. That should equal the 60. We got an error message the other day because something else was going on and they hadn't turned off some prior year students. So it was looking like they served 85 students and they're only supposed to serve 80. Well, because some people in the database were not turned off correctly. So we were able to fix that, right? So I think we've got some questions here.
Okay, let's see what we have. All of our students started at a target school, however, may have moved to a non-target school and we still serve them. Should we only report the original target school here?
Yes, yes, just the students going to the original target school, and then the students that you say are now at the non-target school, you would put them here, right here in this number here. So when you put them together, they equal your total number, right? So again, words have meaning. Total of participants served in the reporting period 21-22 at the target school.
Amel says it refers to participants served during the reporting period. So if a student is not at the target school during the reported period, shouldn't we put the non-target school, which I think you just answered?
Well, I'm not going to list the non-target school. I'm just going to list my target schools, and anybody who's not going to a target school would be here at the non-target school. So I think we did answer that. Let me know, Amal, if that's not, answering your question.
And Piper says, should this number be our eligible and served from database, or should it be the number on our grant? We overserved.
Well, it should be whatever number you decide to serve to report on. I recommend, whenever we go out and recruit with any of these TRIO programs, we always end up serving more than we actually report on because stuff happens. So you need to look at, did you really overserve? Because maybe some of those students barely received any services. Maybe they're continuing students that are barely connecting. You should turn them off. I mean, you're still tracking them, but maybe they shouldn't be active and served, just reported. But that's good. Good news is you've got a new one to replace it. Or maybe did all these new kids stick? So there's a regulation that says you can report students that are new after a certain period of time, right? 10 days during the summer or 60 days in the academic year, can report. And a lot of us right now for 21-22 that have brand new UBs, we're like, yes, the minute, I hit that timeline, I got them. I got another one for my report. For those of you that are established, I always say, did you really overserve? Because are there some students that shouldn't have been active? Make them not active, not served, or maybe some of these new kids didn't go and stick out the whole year, even though they stayed long enough so you could claim them, doesn't mean you have to. Okay, and that's a question that also came up on the Facebook I saw for the Upward Bound. So anyway, so bottom line is, if they gave me money to serve 60, I try to stay at the 60 so that all my numbers match. I don't delete or shred files. I make them not active, not served, not reported, and I put their files in a separate area. So if anyone ever asks, what's this? I said, well, those are students that we did serve. And some of them were served long enough where I could have counted them. But, they didn't stay with us the whole year, or something happened, or, it was just one of those things. If you did, rightfully so, give everyone the same amount of services and somehow you served over, there's only, a certain amount you can go over before they question you as to why you went over. I think it's 20%. But bottom line here is you have to make all the numbers match. So you mentioned, something's in our database versus here, you have to make, you have to go by what the department expects. And if it's more than the department expects, then all your numbers have to be shifted. And keep in mind, the more students you serve, the math is calculated like eligibility, the 2/3, it's not on the 60. If you serve 75, it's off of the 75. And, the GPA and all that, numbers are served. If you're thinking, oh, I need to, 80% of my 60 have to have a GPA of 2.5. Well, if you serve 75, then it's 80% of the 75. So it's to your disadvantage mathematically to report on more than you're supposed to report on. If that makes any sense. But let me know if that kind of Okay, so in Lakai, there's a way to turn them off. It's all of the databases do. So contact your vendor and say, look, I need to turn some of these students off. And usually it's somewhere where you take active off, served off. Now, if they had been reported in a previous, year, you still have to report on them, but they're not counted towards your served numbers. Okay, so that's what we had in one of the clients that I worked with the other day. They were showing, and you know who you are, right? They were showing like 125 students. And I remember they told me they only served 60 or 75. I go, why? Because, well, yeah, I mean, we looked and, oh, there's a lot of prior year students or students that didn't come back. Let's turn them off. We're not deleting them, we're turning them off. And then we did that and we got to the right number. We said, okay. So again, you may get to that and you still have a little bit over. Really look at those students that are new. Were they served enough? Are they coming back? Are they active this year? If not, I would recommend you don't report on them. Okay. If you had a non-target student, let me see in Lakai. So
okay, you see that. Okay, you see that.
Yes. Okay. And I think we've answered all those other questions, right? For continuing students, if we never give the inactive students a last service date and the last APR, what's the earliest date we can make them inactive? Okay. For your continuing students, if we never give the inactive students a last service date. Okay. Right. Because last year for 2021, they were active, right? It's this year that they're no longer active, right? Because you didn't know, you can't predict the future. You thought they're going to be active. I'm sorry, for 21-22. This year's 22-23. See how confusing it is? So in 21-22, they were not active, right? So what you need to do is some databases automatically remember the last service date. So the minute I turn that student from a continuing participant and make them prior year in the database I use, it makes the last service date that they ever received, all of a sudden it comes up on field 28 as being active. But the whole time that he was new or continuing, it stayed dormant. I always had a date there, but it would translate to all 8s on the spreadsheet until I changed them to be prior participant. Then that date became active, all right? Can I code them a prior year participant? You must code for 21-22. Anybody who was not served in 21-22 needs to be coded as a prior year participant. And if your database does not automatically find the last date of service, then you have to utilize a date of last service that occurred anytime before the first year this year started. So September 1st, 2020, or not this year, you know what I mean, 21-22. So August 31st, 21 would be, you'd have to give them that date as the date of last service, because if you put it in the new year, it'll say, oh, you served them this year. It does not compute. So the default date to code students that you're now making prior year for 21-22 would be no later than August 31st of 2021. Okay.
I'll hold off on asking the questions until you get through this segment.
Okay. All right. So we're going to go forward and go through the rest of this. Okay. So now we're looking at the record structure. So now I'm going to start going through the fields here. I recommend strongly that you have this printed out, no matter what database you're utilizing, no matter if you're doing your homemade system or you've chosen to, you know what, on the website, it allows me to, plug things directly in there. Whatever. Okay. What I recommend, I'm saying, I recommend you work in your database completely, whatever you're utilizing, even if it's your spreadsheet, get everything there perfect. And then you go back to the website to upload section 2 and if everything's okay, it should be 5 minutes. Okay. I don't recommend staying on the Department of Ed website and spending hours plugging in stuff there. I don't recommend that. But if that's the way you've been doing it, or that's the way you only know how to do it, fine. But I would recommend that you actually have something, even if it's your homemade system, where you do the majority of the work on this section off-site. I mean, not on the Department of Ed's website, but in your database or your homemade Excel, and then create the data file and then upload to the department. And then if there's an error there, please stop, find out what the mistake is that Blumen or Lakai or you didn't catch before you went there. Don't correct it online. Come back to your database, whatever you're utilizing, fix it there, save a new spreadsheet, create a new Excel a new Excel file, then repeat the submission process and repeat that until you go through it. You may only have to do it 2 or 3 times, but I recommend that because sometimes we get so, wrapped up in getting it done that when you go and take your external Excel spreadsheet and you go to upload it and some mistakes pop up, people, want to fix it right away. So they start fixing it online, but they forgot that they didn't come back to the original source of data, which is their database or their Excel spreadsheet here separately, and they don't make the corrections there. They make them online, submit it, yay, everyone's happy, and everyone doesn't think anything's a problem until later on, a year later, when you start working on 22, 23, and these students, their errors pop up again, and you're like, what's wrong with this database? I fixed this last year. I remember specifically these names I fixed. Well, yes, you fixed them online, but you didn't come back and fix it on the database for whatever you're using internally. So that's my number one rule. You know what? You find something on there, and if you're using something external, please stop, fix it here, and repeat the process, okay? Okay, so that being said, let's look at these fields here. Field number 1, obviously, is the grant award notification on some of your database programs that you're utilizing. We've gotten as far as getting everything turned in, and then we realize we get an error on the very first field because we put in I think we put an O instead of a 0 in the database. So make sure your PR award number, I think you have to put P0, not PO. Okay. All right. Yes. So just make sure. It can be a real downer when you're ready to submit and you have to, oh man, I got to create another, I got to go back, put the number, and then do another data file. So make sure that is correct. It's the easiest question, right? But stuff happens. So of course you will see that the batch year across the board, field number 2 is going to have 2021 on it. All right. That's understood. Then obviously field number 3 will be about whether or not you are a UB or UB Math Science. Case numbers come from the Department of Ed. So one of the things that you will have to do as soon as you get access to the Department of Ed's website, after you do section 1, or you could skip section 1 and go to section 2, simply to download the Excel file from the department that says their version of the final 2021 report in Excel. Download that, save it in a safe place. Well, why do I want to download 2021? Well, because on there are the case numbers that I need. The case numbers that I need for, 1 second here, please. My Alexa just went off for some reason. I wasn't even talking to her. So the case numbers for your students that were new in 2021 are on there. So you're going to need that. And in most database programs, there's an option where you can update your case numbers automatically. If you're doing this homemade, then you might have to plug them in. Okay, but there's a way to do that. So if you look at your database right now, your student listing right now, you may have a lot of continuing students that don't have case numbers. Well, that's because they were new in 21-20 or 2021, sorry. They were new, didn't have a case number. So that's one of the reasons you want to go ahead and do this. But anybody who is new in 21-22 will not have a case number, not until you submit this report. The minute you submit 21-22's APR, you upload your Excel spreadsheet, what you'll get back is their final version of your report for 21-22. And on that one, at least for SSS, we'll check it out for Upward Bound. They already had the case numbers. So you don't have to wait a whole nother year. You can actually import those case numbers for the kids that were new in 21-22 at the tail end of submitting this report. Okay. Do we have any chats I need to answer, Ms. Fleming?
Oh, no, they were just asking about where to find 2021. I was telling them once they log into the website and go to, yeah.
And exactly, I'm glad because you went through the process for SSS. It's almost identical where you could find the stuff. Okay.
Yes.
And you're fixing to go through it again. So there you go. You're a veteran APR submission person, even if initially it was through SSS, but it's the same thing here for UB. All right. So participants' demographic information, last name. So we're not going to spend time, with that 5, 6, 7. I will tell you what, once someone's name is spelled wrong, the department will think it's a totally different person if you corrected it. in your database and try to upload it. I believe there's a place, if I remember correctly, where you can update their name, but they basically, once they're entered in wrong, they have to stay wrong. Otherwise, it'll think it's a different person. Okay, so that's the fun part of it, right? Our database should already have the case numbers, or the department? No, well, it shouldn't. I mean, well, whatever database you have right now, the case numbers for students that were new in 2021 should be on, definitely should be on the website Excel file. I don't know if last year you went ahead and updated it, but whether you did it last year or this year, the case numbers should be there, but they don't automatically show up in your database. You have to get them from the from the website initially. Okay. All right. So moving right along, again, I don't know why I'm having difficulty moving this thing. Okay. So let's get down to date of birth. Again, even date of birth. If date of birth is wrong, you can't change it. So you want to make sure the date of birth is correct. Doesn't count for your objectives, doesn't count for eligibility. For some reason, they just want to make sure it's correct. Gender, you've got male and female so far. You could put not disclosed. I believe you're allowed to have 10% of students that respond to some of these critical fields with no response and still not have a problem. You've got the eligibility here with ethnicity for, Hispanic students, yes or no. And then, the questions about their ethnicity. Okay, so let's go on to number 16, eligibility. So this is something that you don't change. Well, so far, everything I've talked about, you shouldn't have to change, but you definitely cannot change eligibility, nor do you want to mess with it after their first year. You have these choices here. And if someone doesn't fit under low income or first generation, they're neither one of those, you're still, at least UB, not UBMS, but UB is allowed to select students at risk for academic failure only. But they may also have these other characteristics. Maybe they're low income and at risk. And again, they just want to know that breakdown there. If someone is at risk, or they'll want you to answer this for everybody. Again, this is something that shouldn't change after their first year. They want to know, well, is this student at risk? I mean, I didn't indicate here, maybe my student was this, but I still have to answer these questions. They want to know if they're at risk and their reading, language, or math proficiency, was it achieved at their initial time of selection? Well, it could be, yeah, they did not achieve, or they did achieve, and hopefully for most of your students, they're at already, when they were selected, they're at the proficient level. Or maybe they're youngsters where they haven't taken it yet, but you must answer, you just can't leave it blank. Okay. I don't know if we have any questions regarding that.
No questions.
All right. And so far, all these fields should be information that you get right off, either a combination of from a student's application plus any supplemental form that you're screening, because a student wouldn't know if their eligibility, right? They wouldn't know their definition. So it's a combination of getting their name, gender, ethnicity, that date of birth from them. And then from the information you gather, you have to come up with some data, and then some lucky person plugs it into your database. So far, what I'm trying to get to is when somebody's brand new, definitely fields 1 through 18 should be fields that are already answered. When you go to work on the APR, you should not be messing with or having to deal with these fields, because they should have been taken care of on the front end, right? Shoulda, coulda, woulda, right? If you're in a situation where it was a transition of director, so you're finding yourself doing that a lot, then to remind yourself, look, starting in 22-23, I'm going to start running the APR. As soon as I finish this one, I'm going to run an APR for 22-23 to tell me what's missing right now that I should have plugged in for all my new students, so that I shouldn't have to deal with this. So bottom line is, if you maintain your database and stay on top of it whenever you have new students, this should not be an issue on your APR. It would have already been answered. It would not come up as an error. Okay. So just want to point that out, that the APR, may have 66 fields, but you want to set it up so that you don't have to work on 66 fields for every student every year. You only have to work on a handful. because everything else has been updated. And again, this information, the heavy lifting is when someone is new. Now they're also wanting to know about, were they at risk for algebra? So again, were they at risk, or they had not successfully completed algebra, or did they? Hopefully most of your students are a 2, or are they too young? They haven't received that information yet, okay? Or if there's somebody from the 2012-17, otherwise with all your prior year students like that are in college, you shouldn't have to mess with any of this, right? Because they're in college. You're just looking at fields possibly 52 to 66 for those students that are prior year in college. You won't be forced or asked to manipulate anything up until then because there's nothing that pertains to them. So that's another reason where I recommend when you do your APR, no matter what database you use, you should always divide it into 3 major parts. The first part should be dealing with just your current 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. And with that point of view and what are the answers that are applicable and makes responses that make sense for that group, the 9th, 10th, and 11th graders, run your APR, ignore everybody else, and just get their stuff correct. Then I run it just for my 12th graders, okay? And I ignore everything else, and I run the APR, I go through that point of view, look at the fields and the responses. You get into a mode where you're like, I get this, I get this, I get this. Then the third component is to do it for those prior year students in college. Then concentrate on answering the questions for them. For them, I know I'm not going to mess with anything from fields 1 through 52. I'm going to work on 52 through 66 only. Then the fourth thing is to run it all together. I think what I started doing and what most people do is they just jump in there and start dealing with everybody all at once. And then you're literally shifting gears. Well, what's this? What's this? And to me, I can't do that anymore. Maybe I could pass it off when I was younger, but I've got to stay focused and concentrate on one group of students at a time. Okay. So that's just a tip regardless of whatever database you're utilizing. Right.
You do have a quick question. Someone says, Piper says, we have a lot of students whose initial GPA is unknown because they were accepted as 8th graders. Is this going to be flagged as an error?
It would have been only if it was going to come up, it would have come up during their first year. But if they're continuing students, then it's not going to be an issue anymore. They're not going to look at that anymore. Their initial GPA, no, I don't think they even, it would have been 9s, or they should have put 9s, but once they get older, they won't be bugging you about those, unless for some reason someone changed it now for whatever reason. They'll say, hey, you put this before, you got to change it back. So I hope that answered that question. Anybody else? Yeah, either 8s or 9s you're supposed to. Okay. Yeah, okay. So again, and those are those rising, and they do address them if they're rising. When they get selected, they don't have a GPA. So we'll look at some of the responses here. We're coming up to that. So again, once at the time of initial selection, they want to know if they are limited English proficiency. That's either yes or no. Eligibility and initial selection, are they disconnected youth at the time of initial selection? Right, so you've got your choices there. Do they have any other academic need? So other academic need at time of initial selection. So if they had those issues with high risk, which I hope you don't have too many of them, that would be 16. But if they're not a 16, then you need to select just one of these. Okay. Right. And you don't have to change it anymore after that. Now, here are the target schools. So you see the UB regulations define target schools as those designated by the grantee as the focus of services. So please provide that. Here's the website. It tells you, for rising 9th graders, those first served, provide the target school, the student will attend as a 9th grader. So they don't want any middle schools. They want you to put, if they're a rising 8th grader, they want to know the high school they're supposed to be going to, which should be one of your target schools. And see here at first entry into the project. After that, they will never ask again. They don't ask you if the student is still at the same high school. They never ask. You want to know. So in your database, there's probably a window that says current school. And that one you can change all day long after their first year. But initially, you have to, claim a target school. Okay. Then what was their date of first service? That should come from most of your database programs. Whenever they actually show up for their first workshop, It's not data for selection. It's whenever they were first served. So in most database programs, it's set up so when you enter under a separate transaction, you document that they received a service, it will pop up here. So see, everything between fields 1 through 23 should be done for all your new students already in the program. It's 24 where you have to stop and skip it right now and say, well, I'm going to skip 24 for all my new students, because when I document a service provided, when they come to the first workshop, we're going to ring it up in a different window and it should populate here. And if it doesn't, I can plug that in after the fact, but I'm putting in their information. So they haven't received a service yet, possibly. So I'm going to skip 24. And actually 25 is something, now we're getting into questions that you cannot answer. Well, I'm sorry, grade level at first service. Yes, you can't answer this. I got it confused with, I'll show you which one, participation level. But this is wanting to know their grade level at first service. So you should answer this. What were they when they were first served? Okay. And then we have, are they deceased or incapacitated? Obviously, if they're brand new, they just filled out an application, you would put, not applicable. This may be something you have to update, unfortunately, for students, that you're tracking while they're in high school, if something happened to them. And then 27, what is their status? If they're brand new, they're all ones. If they're continuing, they're twos. I don't know, some of y'all may have reentry, but we usually have our ones and twos, and then we have our prior year participants. Okay, sometimes we have transfer and reentry. Now, here's the definitions for each one. So you can see that. Okay. Field number 28, this is what I was getting confused with, participation level in the reporting period. So again, I can go through fields 1 through 27, skip field 24 when somebody's new, that's data first service. And now I kind of have to stop here for a second. 28 and 29, I can't answer when someone's new because I can't predict the future. So 28 and 29, actually, that as well, 29, but 28, I have to wait until the end of the year to pick one of these options here. Did they participate the whole year, part of the year? If they're a prior year, then it stays the prior year, you make it prior year there. So that's another field you have to remember for anybody that you're making prior year for the first time this year. Then were they served by another program during the reporting period? So again, you might have to ask this or check, it's during the reporting year, not upon entry. So do you have a way to ask your students, maybe you have an update form for your continuing students where you're just checking their address, phone number, who do they live with, and you may want to cover yourself. A great way to adhere to the assurance that you will do your best to collaborate with other TRIO programs or similar programs is that you say, one of the ways we do is that we throw out a question every year to our students that are continuing if they are participating in any of these other programs. And so that's one way to cover yourself, and you would answer appropriately, or maybe you've got it made in the shade where you can just put an 8 for everybody. Okay. And that's what most people do. All right. So again, 30 is something that is asking, on an annual basis. But if somebody's brand new, they're going to have the same answer. Previously, it says, hey, what was their grade level when they first started in UB? 10th grade. And then all of a sudden they come back, hey, what's their grade level now? Or for 21, 22, I told you they're a 10th grader. Well, one question was when they were brand new. This question is at the beginning of every year. So that's why this is field number 30 will have to be updated annually to indicate what was their beginning grade level at the beginning of the year. And then good old 31, what was their grade level or post-secondary status at the beginning of 22-23. The academic year following the year being reported. So this is asking, hey, what are these students for fall of 2022? So it should match that whatever they were, if in a perfect world, if they were 10th graders in field number 30, then they would be 11th graders in 31, right? Or if they went to college. Put that there, okay? All right, so now we have high school GPA, 32 and 33. One is weighted, unweighted, I believe, or did they change that? High school GPA, 32. And yes, no, they still want unweighted. And they tell you what the unweighted is there. And, if you don't have it, I've just repeated both. I'm just, They either give it to me or I may try to do the math. But if you're lucky to have both, or just if that's the only one we do, I put the both GPAs for 33 and 32 and 33. It is important that whatever you do, it's over 2.5, right? Because that's the GPA for the objective on how many of our students have a GPA of 2.5 or higher. All right. So whether it's weighted or unweighted, you want to make sure that GPA is, over 2.5, because this is where they pull to see if you've answered that, if you've succeeded with that objective. So that's your first critical field for objectives, right? Then we have field number 35, high school graduation. So of course, with all your younger students, we would put nines, either dropout or still enrolled in high school, right? So that's why when I do the APR for my first group, my 9th, 10th, and 11th graders, I do them in batch entries, because a lot of these students will have the same answers for over, 50 of the fields. I can answer under a quick bulk answer. And then I come back and answer those fields that are specific to them, about like their grade level and their GPA and their participation level. I think those are the only 3 I have to worry about. All the others, they basically have the same answer as not applicable or still in high school because they're so young. So that's why I do it. It's fast for what we do in the database that we use to answer quickly all the questions for all those students, except for those that are very specific to participation level, beginning and ending grade level, and also their GPAs, right? Now, for most of my youngsters, and we can say that all of them have 9s in one click. We can do all of them. But for my seniors, this is where you want to take the time and effort to go through and make sure you get this correct. Very, very important. Like they said in the letter, this has got to make sense. This has got to make sense because they're going to compare this to when you say they went to college, and it has to be immediately after that, the fall semester after whenever they graduated from. Okay. So 36 now is another important field. This is directly related to the objective dealing with not only, the 135 is on graduation, but 36 here is asking about how many students graduated with having completed a rigorous program of study. Okay, that's one of our objectives. So, it's about a yes or a no, and it's about the current or prior participants who graduated high school during the year. So this is telling me it's only counts for my seniors. This is a senior field. 36 is a senior field. So for my younger students, it would be the answer of, they weren't included. I believe it says all other participants, because they were not a current senior or somebody that should have been a senior, but was supposed to graduate last year in 21-22. Okay, so this is an important field. Okay, field 36. Okay, now 37, actually we don't use 37, so I don't know why they haven't taken it off still. 38 is also important. 38 wants to know if a student has passed their high school reading and language at the proficient level. First, they ask about reading and language arts. This is directly related to your second objective on the percentage of students by the time they graduate have scored at the proficient level of both English, reading, language arts, and math. This one's asking about everyone that has passed the whatever the state proficiency. Look in your proposal, it should outline what it is. You should be aware of what the proficient rate is. And this is where you'd have to look at their transcripts or their test scores to see if they did that. Now, this objective, I know, it doesn't say here, but I know this is, and it actually tells you here, right here. I know that this is for my seniors. So even if I had students taking this test and passing it at the 10th or 11th grade level, I could go ahead and answer for them. Yes, they've already passed it, and just let it sit there, because no one is going to do anything with the answers that you put in here for your 9th, 10th, or 11th graders until they're 12th graders. So I've made the decision that, you know what, I'm going to make sure I answer this either a yes or a no for all by the time everyone's a 12th grader. In the meantime, I'm putting a not, because I know it doesn't count until they're 12th graders. But if you know and you want to, go ahead and answer ahead of time, that's fine. But I want you to realize that your numbers won't creep up until they're 12th graders, because this is the objective. The way it's written is just looking at the 12th graders.
You
Okay.
do have a couple of questions. I think it's a good point where we can ask. I think the GPA question was answered. Piper had a question earlier with regards to the 8th graders. So I think you responded to that.
Yes.
And someone else answered that. So Jamari Young, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. She says, I'm a new director and I'm dealing with a system that wasn't being updated. I came in and found out while updating the database, a lot of students have been previously reported incorrectly or wrong. For example, it's someone in my system as a 12th grader who actually graduated last year. How do I go about this? Now that might be a private conversation, or you may want to talk offline.
Yeah.
Do I leave it? Do I leave it since it was already previously reported? So
yeah, some things, it depends on, I know you're saying that, but I would have to find out exactly what fields, because some things you can change, some things you cannot change. So if it's somebody who's if it's already been a senior and they've already put those numbers in, it's hard to go back. But if it's someone in the younger grade levels that, I thought they were a 10th grader, they're really an 11th grader, we can still maybe work with that. But yes, if you could send her my email address.
okay. I'll drop it in the
great.
chat.
I'd love to talk with you offline to see what we can do for that. I think I have something here from someone regarding academic performance standard testing. We didn't make our objective of 60%. Due to COVID, the seniors in their sophomore and junior year did not have the test. This is the only objective we didn't meet. Our other, okay. Fortunately, yes. Well, this APR, okay, so are you talking about, I'm confused. Are you talking about their performance on the APR for 21-22 or currently for 22-23? Because 21-22, the year we're currently reporting on to the department, is the 5th year of funding. So fortunately, the 21-22 is not considered in your PE points. Okay,
you're responding to who?
Colleen.
Oh, in Q&A. Okay.
Yeah, because I just want to state that. So for this year, for 22-23, the 22-23 year is also not going to be counted toward PE points. Okay, so your 2nd year of funding during this cycle, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year will be counted for PE points. So you kind of got to pass on the 21-22 report, the one we're working on right now. We always try to meet our objectives, right? But I have to be for real and tell you that they're not going to be calculated for prior experience. Okay, does that make sense, Colleen?
Because that's the 5th year.
Right. This report is for the 5th year of funding, which is not counted in PE points. The year 22-23 that we're currently on, 22-23, is the 1st year of funding. So that also doesn't count for PE points. I do have a quick question. Can GPA not be above 4.0? I don't remember it in the past. It would give me an error message. I think what I had to do is just cut it off at 4.0 to make it go through. Maybe they changed that, but I remember in the past, it would give me an error if it wasn't at least a 1.0, it would give me an error if it was over a 4.0, but we can check, or I'll double check with that. But if you get that error message, just bring it down to 4.0. Okay. Do we have any more chats?
Jennifer says, is there a defined summer period? Is there a defined summer period?
In what regards? You mean there is no defined summer period, except I usually, if I had to define it, there is an SSS, there is a specific, anybody that is after a certain June 1st, they force you to make them a brand new, a brand new summer student. But I mean, I think I need a little bit more information there, what you mean by that. Everyone can have a different beginning summer component date. And whenever your summer component date starts, that's where the 10 days that a student has to be active in order for you to be able to count them would start. So again, sorry about that, but I think I need a little bit more clarification there, if you can.
If Piper says, if tests were waived due to COVID or for other reasons, should we mark NA?
Yes, but unfortunately, if they're seniors, You know, an NA still, the math is the math, and NA will be considered a no. So, you know, again, that's why on this APR, good news is that it's not being counted toward prior experience points. So you may not meet your objectives, you may not get your points, but you know, they're going to give points, but they don't count toward anything. And I don't want to sound so flippant, like, oh, no big deal. But, you know, hopefully they're back on track. So by the end of this year, and even this year, again, year one doesn't count. But hopefully by the time, you know, 23, 24 starts, those tests will be in place, or maybe they're in place now. So remember, an NA, you know, still counts as, in the math, it still counts as a no, it's a negative. Okay.
And Colleen says that she thinks she's mixing up with talent search. Her
Yeah,
question.
hey, I do it all the time, Colleen. I do it all the time. So I had to triple check myself. So I wasn't like questioning you. I was like, Lisa, get your stuff together. This is upward bound. Make sure you got the right years. You know,
Dr. McLeod says year one may count. Remember the current funding cycle, they took the best 2 or 4 years.
For the previous funding cycle, but year 4, yeah, yes, yeah. Years, typically it's 2, 3, and 4. Okay, but I think they counted for last year, they counted either 3 or 4 or 1 or 2. But they didn't, they're not counting the last year 5. This is based on year 5. Plus you're already funded. I think
she might be referencing when you said year 1 in this new cycle may not count. I guess she's responding to that, Dr. McLeod. I'm not sure. But I think that the department had, you know, created, you know, they offered a special accommodation due to COVID. I don't know, right, unless there's something else you know of why they may count year 1, Dr. McLeod?
They could have said for the competition that you already were awarded, that they were allowing you to count year 1 and 2 of the 2017-22 cycle, because everything went to, you know what, during years 2 and 3. So they could have done that, but moving forward, you know, unless they put out a new letter. So that's why, of course, you always want to try to meet your objectives, right? Because you never know until, you know, they could come out and say, guess what, y'all, we're gonna count it on the first 2 years, but we won't know that in the future, just going by what they usually do. And because of all this stuff and trying to recover from COVID and all this other stuff, I would bet that they're going to stick to 2, 3, and 4 moving forward. But, you know, I'm not the department, I can't say, so I just go by past history. And yes, for the competition before, they probably had to do something different and say, no, 2 and 3 were really bad, so we're going to shift it and give you points for first and second year. I hope that we don't have another dilemma or issue where it causes that in the future for them to come back and say, oh, by the way, year 1 counts. But I do know year 5 is done, we're refunded. So on this one here for 21-22, it cannot count toward your prior experience points. Okay, what testing do you use to determine state assessments? You need to look in your proposal. There should have been under the objective section, or in the needs section, objective section, and even in the evaluation plan, it should have been specifically stated there. Okay, anything else, Ms. Fleming?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, great. All right, so let's go here again. Okay, so fields 38, 39 will be calculated when students are seniors. So even if you get it wrong up until then, you still have time until they're seniors to get it right. Advanced placement, they want to know, it has nothing to do with any objectives. They just want to know if your students are in advanced placement courses or not, yes or no, or they're not, that are a school that offers neither one of these. Again, they're just taking, survey says, you know, dual enrollment. Again, they're wanting to know if you get 40 or 41 wrong, not the end of the world, because it does not calculate toward any of the math behind getting you points for your objectives, right? 42, dual enrollment, if they got credentials for being dual enrolled. Some of y'all have that, so you would put that information in. Again, it does not calculate into your objectives. It doesn't give you points for college enrollment because they're not considering college enrollment until after they graduate from high school. That's what they want, is the first day of college enrollment, not while they're dual enrolled. Advanced math courses, they want to know specifically, you know, has a participant completed 2 years of math beyond Algebra 1? So I typically wait to answer this for my seniors. but you can answer it, as you go along if you want to. It doesn't tie into any of the objectives. They're asking these questions because these are performance measures for upward bound programs collectively, but your individual project is not bound to any performance measures here. But they're listed here because the one upward bound and one upward bound math science national program said, as a program, we're going to track these benchmarks. And so that's why you see them, even though they don't count toward your objectives. Okay. So moving on, the FAFSA. So this is definitely about your current or your prior year students that should have been seniors. If they're youngsters, then you would put that they did not graduate this year. Okay. Or if they're the older students, their prior year, they already graduated, they're in college already. Date of last project service. So this is where it is important. So for those of you that are turning off students, you just realizing now you either stepped into something or you realized, what, our database still has students from last year we didn't serve. So I got to turn them off as not being active, not being served. So that means they're prior year. And our database, luckily, we have one that automatically finds the last date of service that they had before this year started, so it's accurate. But if you don't have that, then you just need to make sure you select a date that happened before the beginning of this of 21-22. So really any date, of course you want to try to find out when they were last served in the previous year and put that date. But if you can't find it, it's got to be at least the date that was before the beginning of your new year, whether you're September 1st or June 1st start date. Do we have a question?
You have a question for field 43.
Okay.
The question is, do we put no in 43 if they're 9th and 10th grade?
Participant completed 2 years of math beyond Algebra 1 in high school. Well, it depends. Yes, if they did not, they could be an advanced student, right? An advanced 9th or 10th grader, and they took yes or no. So it depends on the student. But I typically, here are the classes here. So depending on what your students were at the school they're at, what is the usual grade level? So I kind of know that, and I can go, what? They're too young. They're too young. So I'm going to put no, no, no. Oh, 11th graders, let me check this out and answer for them individually. So I hate to say that it all depends. But it says completed 2 years of math beyond Algebra 1. So it kind of depends when they start that at your schools. And I don't want to make a blanket statement because it could be different for different schools. Okay. All right. So data last service, again, we talked about that. Once it's been submitted, see, sometimes they tell you can't change it. And it says here, you do not need to provide the exact date. You can use the 15th of the month. But whatever, moving forward, whatever database you utilize, make sure that in the future that it's set up so that it'll give you this information so you don't have to hunt for it. And maybe the database you utilize always shows something for everybody, and people start to panic and say, oh my God, all my new and continuing students have something in field 45. I'm going to take it out. Well, there's no need to take it out, because as long as they're labeled as new or continuing, it'll automatically put in, I think it's the 8s. Let's see here. It'll put the 9s in. The 9s will transfer to the Excel file, even though in the database, you may actually see a date during this year, as long as they're new and continuing back in, I think, field 26 or 28 or something. I keep forgetting that this will remain 999s. The minute I make them a prior participant in that previous field, it'll automatically populate when we last saw them. And it's going to be when we last saw them, and hopefully in the previous year. Sometimes we have to tweak that, because sometimes we send emails out, or maybe we did have a contact with them, but it was just one contact. Is that enough? Some people say, well, if I'm really desperate for numbers and I provided them with 2 services, okay. But again, this is upward bound, and they're kind of giving us a lot of money to provide, sufficient services. So was that enough? And if you have somebody else to replace them, then even though they did get a service or services, maybe I saw them barely the first fall semester. If I've got somebody new that I can replace them with, I'm going to do that. Back in the day when I first started in Upward Bound, there used to be an objective that penalized us, the project, if we didn't keep the same kids active in our program. So, we kept students on, even though they weren't coming to barely anything, so that we wouldn't hurt, our objective and our performances and our prior experience at the time. But then they changed it, and they changed this way back in like 2012, where they got rid of that objective. The department did. Actually wasn't a regulation, but the TRIO office rewrote it. So now you see our objectives are all about keeping students, from one grade level to the next, and then also academic performance measures. So we're not penalized anymore as a project if we do not keep the same group of students. When it's appropriate, if students are not coming to programming and are not eating up almost $5,000 worth of services every year, you need to bless them and let them go. You'll still track them, but you're no longer penalized for that. I mean, someone could say, well, I still have to track them, right? But they weren't coming to anything anyway. And so I don't know how, if they refuse services or not coming, how much of an impact can you make? And you're actually putting yourself more at risk because you got money going out to someone who's really not utilizing it. So again, when it's time, put in a reason, but for most students, hopefully it's not applicable. There's a 99 because they're still there. Do we have some more questions?
You do. Okay. In field 42, they're asking if a student took a DE course but received an F, should we mark it as 3, that they never enrolled but completed at least one course?
And 42, again, did they complete? The question is here. I would go back to there. If they enrolled but not completed, then you would put the answer.
So they received an F.
Then they didn't. Well, they completed it, right? It didn't say successfully. And again, whatever definition you utilize, if you can't find the exact answer here, because that's kind of where you look at it and, well, whatever, am I sure, they didn't complete a certificate. They didn't complete, well, let me see those. Participant never enrolled. They did complete, but is an F considered? I mean, how does a college consider that? Would someone consider that? I don't know. That's your call. But whatever you decide to do, be consistent. If there's somebody else in the same situation, again, I would not spend a lot of time on 42. Why? Because it does not count toward any of your objectives. But come up with your definition. To me personally, I would probably put no. She completed but got an F. Does that mean she usually, maybe it's me, but I don't think that goes anywhere. I don't think you can claim it. If she can claim it and utilize it and somehow get credit for the hours, then maybe I would say completed.
Okay.
Is there any other questions?
Yes, I'll do it quickly because I know you have several other, let's see. Can we revisit? I think we can do that at the end. Somebody wants to revisit the conversation, the post-secondary enrollment and attainment. I think you can do that at the end about certificates, etc. So we'll come back to that at the end. And then Piper's question was, if I have inadvertently changed or corrected an incorrect date of last service that was previously submitted on the APR, will the system flag it so I can change it back? I think I made a mistake. So they changed something that was incorrect, but they changed it, but it had already been reported as incorrect. It was already, reported, but will it be flagged?
Will it be
in this submission? Will it be flagged because it was the date of last service?
Yes, you can't change date of last service. Is that your question?
Yes, I think that is her question. Let me double check.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah,
yes.
Click then. Yeah, you can't change date of last service. You have to go back. Okay.
Right. Christine says, I apologize for contradicting.
Yeah, well, that's the one we're going to review at the end when we look through the choices.
Okay.
Is there any other?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay, great. All right, so moving on ahead, we've got the math courses, the application, date of last service, we covered that. Participation and status in secondary school, reason for leaving, like we talked about that. Project services, now this should come from, notice these are not required services. You would think they would ask about required services, but there are services about that could occur. A lot of people might not have these services offered. Maybe you don't have work studies, so you would put not offered by the project, okay? And then over here, you go to project services. employment for if it's arranged by the project. So a lot of us don't have this. I mean, we may have cultural activities. And again, some of the database programs come from all automatically calculate this from services provided in a different area. If not, then you would just look and see if the student received this on an individual basis. Community service, project services regarding LEP. So notice they're not asking about academic tutoring, anything like that. Just some random services that are all permissible, by the way. Now we get into the senior stuff. Your 52, field number 52, source of post-secondary education. How did you verify this? And notice that self-reported is still optional. It's a valid option. Okay, I prefer, of course, probably 2 or a third party. But for most of our students, it'll be an 8, that they're too young for that to do. And some of our seniors didn't go to, or they completed high school, but they didn't go. Okay, so we're looking at here, we have 53, post-secondary education. We have the date when they first enrolled. Accuracy is very important, just like their high school graduation date, but their accuracy is important here. That the format here is on, you want to make sure you put the right date. For everybody else, it's 888s. Could be 9s for someone who's a senior, excuse me. Got dry throat right all of a sudden. So this is where you want to put, for those dual enrolled students, you want to include the date that they first started in the fall, or really in any time after they graduate from high school. So don't use the date of the summer bridge program as the first day, just like they're saying don't use, it's the same definition or answer to why you wouldn't want to use dual enrollment. So here it says here, also a student in the dual enrollment program should not be reported as enrolled unless they enroll in post-secondary program after high school graduation. Whatever you put in 53 needs to make sense with their cohort year. The date of the post-secondary enrollment report in this field should be the date, that the student enrolled in post-secondary education following graduation from high school or completed an alternative educational program. Once the date has been submitted, you cannot change it. So that's where it's sad, if students take that gap year, and if they don't go when they're supposed to go, that's an issue, unfortunately. So that's where I say, please take an online course. Please take one class. You can take your gap spring semester off. I just need to get you on that boat that says, APR, post-secondary cohort. I need to get you on there, even if you want to stop off for a year, 2 years. I mean, I just need you to get back on that. I just need you to take off with that group when they take off, when they're supposed to, according to the Department of Ed, which would be by the fall semester of the, after they graduate from high school. All right, so here we have the cohorts. So anybody that started college in fall of 2022 needs to be marked as 2022. And so you can see how whatever you put in 53 has to match 54. 54 has to make sense with 53. You can't add any more records. You can't make changes. And this is where I do see lately, I've seen with the clients that I've worked with that there's always an error, or sometimes people realize later, too late, that someone started. And at the time, they went back, they took a gap year. That's what they find out. And I go, well, we can't change it now, but, there's some things you can control, some things you can't. Errors we can't control. So we want to make sure, we definitely want to triple check that. And I would spend a lot of time making sure that's absolutely correct, because then you can change it after that. All right. So here you would put in the code of the college they're going to. And then here, the post-secondary education, what is their college status at the beginning of the 22-23 academic year following the year being reported? So when I go to say accepted into post-secondary education program, but not yet enrolled, that would be for probably at the time, remember, this is supposed to be done, by, of the fall. Do you have students that have been accepted? These would be your graduated seniors, right? That at the beginning of 22-23 were accepted and about to be enrolled, or were they first year students following the completion of high school? Or were they the older students? Or were they, and these actually, these would be students, I think, that might be deferred, but then this could be the first year student now in the following year. So yes, at the beginning of 22-23 would be these students, hopefully most of them. You might have some of these. Post-secondary student continuing beyond the first year enrolled, and you have these choices here. And again, it says a student who's in a dual enrollment program should not be reported as enrolled unless he or she enrolls in a post-secondary program after high school graduation. Post-secondary education status, and this is where we want to know if they completed a certificate or diploma occupational program, or no, they are pursuing something else. So for those of our students that with the majority are focused on bachelor's degree, then you can go ahead and say no, they're not doing that, but they're doing something else like an associate's degree, or maybe they're not doing that. And if they do get that, certificate or diploma, then the date. But if they're not going for that, then it would have this automatically plugged in, or you would plug this in. They're pursuing, for example, maybe a bachelor's degree. So again, they want to know about the associate's degree. So if they are doing, if they get an associate's degree, great. If they don't, they're pursuing something else. Or, answer accordingly, then did they get that degree? Well, no, they didn't, because they're getting a bachelor's degree. And then the bachelor's degree here. So in the bachelor's degree here, it's the, yes, they attained the bachelor's degree, hopefully, because that's what we're shooting for. Or they enrolled but did not complete it yet, or they left it. And if they did graduate, excuse me, if they did graduate over here, you would put the date. Okay. And this is important because, of course, we're tracking for the 6 years when they started. And they want to know, and they want to know when the dates are turned in. You can't really change them. They say that over and over again. Post-secondary education, the objective, is this a student, the objective numerator for enrollment? Is this somebody who graduated high school in 21-22 with a regular diploma and enrolled in college? So these are regular diploma students that enrolled in college, yes or no? Hopefully it's they went. A 2 is someone who graduated with a regular secondary school diploma and they deferred enrollment, or this is someone who went ahead and who graduated from high school with a regular diploma during high school, who graduated with a regular diploma. So this is confusing, the way they ask the question. I always stumble upon this one. So if they graduated, a 12th grader that either was a current 12th grader that was with you, or a prior year participant who graduated and they got a regular secondary school diploma and they went to college. So yeah, that's the one. If they got deferred, so really if they didn't go, instead of just saying they didn't go, then it would be a 3. They're students that graduated with a regular diploma and didn't go to college. So that they just didn't come out and ask for it. So that's where you would put any of the students that are not going. This is an interesting question here. They want to know if students had remediation, right? And then over here, down here at the bottom where it says post-secondary completion, did they get, you're right, the associate's degree. So the certificates do not count with the associate's degree. You know what? I was getting it confused with Talent Search. Talent Search does include the certificates. So you're right. So it counts with the associate and the bachelor's degree, not a certificate, but associates and bachelor's degree. I stand corrected. I apologize for that. So here it is where they're looking at your associate's degree and bachelor's degree within 6 years of graduation. And then this APR is looking at 2016 post-secondary cohort. Okay, 2016. It doesn't, you can update all your prior year graduates annually so that you stay on top of it, but they have 6 years. So these students who went to college in 2016 could have gotten a certificate, an associate's degree, and a bachelor's degree. They could have gotten all three, or they just went for that one, and they could have done it any span of time. Okay, so here you have the answer, and so hopefully it's a 1. If not, it's a no. Let's see what else you have here. And then if for most of our students, it's not applicable. And then here for STEM, the last question is regarding the UBMS participant post-secondary education cohort. So again, if you're a UBMS program, you would answer this for those students that are in the cohort 2016. If not, if you're regular, it would be an 8 right there. Okay. All right. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, I'm sorry here. 67. This is where you can change their name moving forward. Okay. So with all your new students, you want to triple check their initial entry information like date of birth, spelling of name, because at least with date of birth, you won't be able to change that, but you do have an option later on to change the name for whatever reason, if you put their name wrong or spelled it wrong, or if they decided to change their name later on. But initially, you want to make sure you're on top of that. Do you have any questions, Ms. Fleming?
Yes, if you don't mind, if you could go back to that field, because I know that was a topic of great discussion in terms of enrollment and what counts and what doesn't count. So if you could just repeat that one more time, because I remember people had a few questions about that in the chat originally.
Right here. So did the student get field 65? Did they, their post-secondary enrollment cohort, so you go back to 2016, by this APR by the 21-22, did they receive either an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree within 6 years? So the associate's degree does count, not a certificate, the associate's degree or a bachelor's degree.
Okay, so that hopefully maybe answers the question that Anonymous had in the Q&A. Can we revisit the conversation of post-secondary enrollment and attainment? You said before the certificates count, but counts for what? Cohort eligibility?
No, the certificates count for talent search, I'm sorry, but for upward bound, it's associate's degree and bachelor's degree.
Okay, so that question should be answered. The next question is, if a junior in high school graduates early and enrolls in college the following fall, senior year, how do we record or mark this properly? We keep getting verification errors.
You know what, that turns out to be an issue. Before, they were really involved with, prior to this funding cycle or the APR, they were really concentrating on graduation cohort. And it used to be a pain in the where if students graduated early. Because we're like, wait a minute, by the time you were 9th graders, we're supposed to kind of figure out when you were going to graduate from high school. And if you notice, they never ask us for a graduation cohort. They will ask us for a graduation year, that field that we can plug in when they graduated, but they no longer ask for a high school graduation cohort. What's the big deal? The big deal now is this one here. When did they go to, when did they go to college? Here, this cohort, where is it now here? All the way back here. Post-secondary school, post-secondary, this one, field 54. All right, so what I do, if I understand you correctly, if it's somebody who last year should have been an 11th grader, right? Should have been an 11th grader, but actually they had enough credits and you treated them like a 12th grader, then I change, for because that's one of the fields you can change every year is what was their grade level at the beginning of fall 2021. So I would change him from an 11th grader to 12th grader. You haven't reported yet on 21-22. This is 21-22. So you would make them a 12th grader and treat them as a 12th grader. You should not get an error when you do that. Let me know if you do, because now we are not held to any high school graduation cohort like we were before. We are just held to, treat them as a 12th grader so that everything will match. Their high school graduation match, their grade level of 12th graders should match with the high school graduation date, should match, those three should also match with the post-secondary cohort as when you plan for them to go to college in fall 2022. Does that make sense? And let me know if for some reason you're still getting an error message. But I love that we are no longer held to the high school graduation cohort like we used to be. Now it's all about when are they going to college? Okay, but it happens a lot. We have students that graduate early. So that's why at the beginning of every year, you want to touch base and to make sure that everyone's in the right grade level, because stuff can happen over the summer or even in the middle of the semester. You could have found out, oh, guess what? I'm going to graduate early. What? You're only 11th grade. Well, I have enough credits. Okay, well, I got to switch in my database. Now I'm going to say you were a 12th grader just to make everything match. Sometimes you have to be wrong to be right, if you know what that means. So if you leave it the way it is, you will keep getting error messages.
Okay, and then Piper says, I ran into a question when filling out the PSE section for post-secondary section for high school dropout, sadly. What is the best way to handle these fields in that circumstance? Are they unknown or not enrolled?
Give me a set of fields. Are you talking about let me see, well, you look at that. Oh, the post-secondary section. So 52 through 66 of those fields. Okay, I'll get to that in just a second. Someone says, I know this APR is for 21-22. However, we did not include new students. Do we
not include the ones they recruited in 22-23? Do we recruit those in 21? Do we add those in 21-22? No.
No. And I think without knowing the whole picture, I have to be careful. It's like my gut is telling me no, because new students to be recruited for 22-23 don't receive services until 22-23, and this is everything about 21-22. You should just focus on 9th and 12th graders served. Yes, this is about anyone who was served and that you're going to report on for 21-22. Okay. Can we count those students that are enrolled in a certificate program immediately following high school graduation in the cohort? I believe so, because there is a place where you can say they started college, and it's a place for them to say they're working on a certificate. Now, as someone commented, hopefully that's a stepping stone, and that they can go from the certificate into the associate's degree at least, so that it will give you credit for the last objective. But to me, it looks like you can count those students that enrolled in a certificate program immediately following high school graduation in the cohort. But if they stay in that certificate program only, it's not going to give you points on the objective. Okay, but the hope is that, some of us have to start there and they can move on to associate's degree at least, if not the bachelor's degree. They have 6 years. So so that they got on that boat, or that ship that says, college cohort 2022 taking off now. They're on the plane or the boat. They're on there now. They're going for a certificate, and I don't want to downplay a certificate, but at least they're there, and you'll track them. You'll be asked to track them, and you want to track them because hopefully they will roll into an associate's program by the time they're done, to help you meet that objective. But even if they don't, being in a certificate program, like I said, it could be very lucrative for them, and that's what they need. But at least they got on there, and you have a chance to check them. So let me go back on the post-secondary question. So if someone has dropped out. So let's look at those. We start like at field number 52. So if they didn't go, so I would put, well, would you say they dropped out or they didn't go? What was the question again?
Dropped out.
So then it would be an 8. And then I wouldn't have to put anything in 53 because, they're not expecting anything there. But for the other ones here, it would be 8s. You see the tone here? I mean, not the tone, but the script here, or the pattern. And then it would be 8s and so forth. And most of these questions, it would be 8s if they're a dropout. Hopefully that answers your question. And hopefully you don't have that many of them. So that's great that you have to ask about it, because it doesn't happen that often. Okay. For the high school GPA, I get an error for students that have awaited. Okay. Have you tried, I get an error for students that have a weighted GPA above 4.0. What should I do in that case? Have you tried just maxing them out at 4.0? Because I believe in the past, it doesn't let you go higher than a 4.0. Try that. Try that and let me know.
Christine, has your question been answered? Could you drop in the chat if your question has been answered?
Thank you, Christine. I was getting my Town Search and UB mixed up. I'm surprised I didn't bring in SSS too. And engineer at the same time. These kids have to get a PhD, otherwise it doesn't count. No, I'm just joking, okay?
Yes, that her question has been answered, so we have no other
I
questions
was
right
switching,
now.
I was switching, mixing my programs up. But again, they ask about it. So the point is, if they get on that post-secondary cohort, yeah, right. If they get on that, then even if it's just with, and I don't want to discount the certificates because I wish I'd gotten a few more certificates than more so than some of these advanced degrees, so to speak. But they get on there, then there's a chance for them to pursue and help you out. But at least they're getting something, right? They're not taking that gap year off, which will not, help you at all. Isn't it sad? These students could take a whole year off or even a semester off, and it's hard to, this year, because the report is so late, I probably would put, some of my seniors who graduated and they didn't go right away, but they came back in the spring and I know they're there right now. I'm going to put that they went. If this report had been turned in November, I could, and the student promised me that they'd go in the spring, I can't, rightfully say, well, they're going because they told me so. But by this point in the game, I know that some of my graduated seniors maybe took off the fall semester. I probably would go ahead and put them on that bus because the bus hasn't taken off yet that says post-secondary cohort, 2022 or bust. It's still there idling. And I know she's in college. I got National Student Clearinghouse. I have verification. I'm putting her on the bus, even though she didn't go in the fall. What I can't do is those students that aren't going to go for a whole year. And unfortunately, some of those students rightfully take off some time and they still come back within the 6 years on their own and they get an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree in less than 6 years. And that's great for them. I'm happy for them. But because they didn't get on that post-secondary cohort 2022 vehicle or bus or whatever you want to call it, they missed the bus. And although they probably got their associate's degree and bachelor's degree before everyone else, I'm not able to count it. Let's see if we have.
Yes. Oh, you got it.
It's been suggested you put your on the APR just to brag on the past show. Yeah, they need to change it for UB, but also I think not only to brag about it, but I think it will also, if you have some students that get into certificate programs, then when you track them, I think it'll give you a clue as to really, pay extra close attention to them and notice that, okay, they went for a certificate. Let me check on her now. She's still there. She got it. Okay, she got it. Maybe I can, send her an alumni thing or just checking in on her. Have you thought about doing this? I can't provide direct services, but I'm kind of glad that I can, when I'm tracking them, someone else has made me track what type of program they're in so that I can kind of behind the scenes do what is called tracking activities to try to push them to the right people like an SSS or an EOC or somebody so that they continue, because then I can get the credit and, it'll probably help them too. Here I am trying to figure out what would help me, but, so it's definitely a performance measure, although it's not calculated for the objective. But again, it's one way to flag them and to pay extra close attention, because you kind of know the ones that are in the associate's degree or bachelor's degree, okay, they may not need as much information or tracking as the other ones. But if I have 10 or 5 of them in a certificate program and I'm forced to check on that, then maybe I can do some things to help the process along so that maybe some of them fall into the associate's degree category within the 6 years. So yes, it could be for bragging, it could be for stressing that, what type of programs, and also giving students, it's something good for them to be in that certificate program. But again, on the back end, we're kind of pushing them along and trying to, make sure they stay, active and push them to do that. So let's see.
Great question. We have, you see it? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, students who have moved away and I cannot find what high school they transferred, a new director, oh gosh. Unfortunately, you can either use unknown. There's to a point where you cannot come up with something that you don't have. So you have two choices. You can put unknown or you could put no. Either way, an unknown is going to be a negative, and if it's a field that counts toward an objective, an unknown is counted as a no. So sometimes you just have to bless it, let it go. And for the next 4 years or 2 years, if you can't find them, you would put, no. Until if your project has lost someone or has broken up with someone during their 9th, 10th, and 11th grade year, you know what, you're still, even as a 9th grader, then you have to once a year face the music to either try to reach out for them again, try to find them. I don't know how else to do it, or just say unknown and just take that hit. Thankfully, none of your objectives say that 100% of your students will do this and this. When you say everything, I mean grade level, I feel you. I mean, I'm trying to think if there's any other way. With Clearinghouse, we can kind of do that for the college students, but I wasn't sure on how to do it high school wise. Anyone out there have any clues what they do when they're trying to track missing or prior year 9th, 10th, and 11th graders? I mean, it's tough. It's tough. So when you mean everything, yes, you just go ahead and put unknown, unknown, unknown. The only thing is possibly you might get flagged if you have more than 10% of the fields that are labeled, of critical fields that are labeled unknown. And some of those fields are not considered critical. I mean, not all of those fields are considered critical, that you mentioned that, look, I have nothing for anybody. Well, you got their name and, I'm pretty sure, because of social promotion, right? I'm pretty sure if initially last year they were this grade and this grade, I think I can answer that one. Now, GPA, you got me there. Test scores, you got me there. By the time they're seniors, you got me there. I'll have to put unknown or no. Either way, an unknown is a no, but no one has an objective that says 100% of their, by the time students or seniors have to do this, this, and this. Okay. And if that gap of questions, some of them may not be critical. So what they consider critical fields. So hopefully we'll get flagged.
Sonia says, thank you for providing this very important information.
Well, thank you. Thank you all. And thank you for participating and making sure that, we've got the right definitions and everything else. It's 10% on each student, 10% for the project overall, Piper. It would be 10% okay, there's some critical fields, and I can't think of them right now because I'm remembering SSS, but there's like 10 or 12 SSS critical fields. So imagine, there's 10 or 12 critical fields like date of birth, you can't have more than 10% unknown, gender, grade level. So those are the ones that they really focus on and say, hey, you know what, you've got 12% of your answers are unknown here. What's up with that? Or you need to answer, why that's the case. So I don't know yet enough. I haven't gotten error messages enough because we usually put yes or no or whatever. So when you're in a situation like that, if for some reason it says you have too many unknowns, then go ahead and change some of them to no and leave it a no for forever, so, because unknown equals no anyway. Some district keeps enrollment records when a student transfers out, start at the last known school. So, you're gonna have to be detective now and try to track people down. You have to be like a stalker and stalk some of them and see, but you can only do what you can do, and you've got current kids to worry about. So think in your mind and say, you know what, I've got about 10 or 12 of these missing students. Just gonna put unknown or no. And then that way you won't get flagged for having unknown answers. You see the difference between having a blank or an unknown versus a yes or a no? I'll take the no's over the unknown anytime, okay? And again, it may depend on the field, but usually I go with the no's even if I don't know. Any other questions?
Just a couple of questions before I think you wrap up. It's 1:59. So Piper says you can also try social media and phone calls, but thanks for your help.
Yeah.
Then also Anonymous says, this is just a question for insight. The times are changing. A lot of students no longer feel like they need college. They're all leaning more towards CTE programs. Do you think the Department of Ed will start to accept this as placement in the near future?
Well, I know they consider college enrollment, correct me if I'm wrong, even for getting into a post-secondary institution. I don't know if it says they have to from the get-go be involved in a associate's or bachelor's degree, and the CTE program, I'm assuming, remind me what that is. That's a college, it's a certificate program. It's not a associate's or bachelor's degree, correct?
Hopefully they'll respond. The
Just to
CTE
make sure
program,
just to make sure we're on the same page.
correct.
Okay, so are you talking about enrollment is different from attainment? You see, it clearly states that right now they asked about associate's or bachelor's degree. So if your question is in the future, do you think that the department may consider something besides an associate's degree or bachelor's degree? I don't know. That argument needs to be made when we go up for reauthorization, which should happen again. They're going through negotiated rulemaking, but pretty soon. They said this month, but I haven't heard anything. So check on the COE website to see if they're going to do that. But those would be one of the things that we would want to or bring to somebody's attention on the committee that actually makes the reauthorization rules, to say, you know what, y'all should consider this or give us more clarification on this. So, I don't know what the department, they got so many other things going on right now. I'm afraid that this can is going to get kicked down the road again. Just when we're about to start negotiated rulemaking, something else happens that kind of takes everybody off course. And now I think, Ms. Fleming, I think it's going to drag on again. And I think we're going to be stuck with the same regulations again for another 2 or 3 years, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Any other questions? But I wish they would. I wish they would revisit that. I wish they would revisit the eligibility about the low income. I wish they would revisit the first generation question to give us more clarification. I have a long list, so I'll add that to the list. Anyone else have any questions? We went through all the fields. I'm going to reiterate that can you count a 2-year? I think we answered that one. Was your question and answers? Find out. Yes. I want to repeat that the way I attack an APR is, number one, whatever database you're using, make sure you're in the right year. Okay. You may be working in 22, 23. Make sure you change your system settings to go back to 21, 22. Like, ignore anything in 22, 23. I don't believe in going into 22, 23 and then working backwards. Put yourself in 21, 22. And then divide that APR into 3 major areas. Work on your 9th, 10th, and 11th graders separately. Get their stuff, correct. Then work on your 12th graders and spend a lot of time on your 12th graders, making some people 12th graders, like 11th graders, that are graduating early, make them 12th graders. And then work on your prior year participants. Then run the report together. Then create your data file. And then go to section 2 on the website. And then see if there are any errors. If you get any errors, find out what they are, stop, come back to the database or your original spreadsheet, fix them there, okay? And then create a new spreadsheet and go back and forth if you have to. What you don't want to do is fix them online and turn it in. You'll be happy for, a while, but then these errors will come back to haunt you a year from, when you're doing 22, 23, because the errors will still be in your internal database. So that's my one thing. Really make sure that you are working, always updating your internal spreadsheet so that you won't have any more. Hopefully that error won't come up again. And some of y'all, don't be surprised if you're missing students, especially those of you that are stepping into something. Your database should have, or the department or either your database should be able to tell you, look, you're missing these students. And this is how to bring them back. Okay. Any other questions? Is this recording going to be uploaded? It won't be on the Google Drive, but it will be. I'm going to put it in your the Zoom follow-up emails that you get. It'll be listed there. It'll also be posted on the department of, it'll be posted on my blog post. Okay. The logistics of going to section 2, you just upload the data file and it will pretty much be clear what to do after that. Yes. I mean, I don't know about pretty much clear. I'm only going by my experience with SSS and they have the writing in tiny little letters. So if it's your first time, I urge you, go ahead and read, but they give you, if anything, they try to give you as much detailed information what you do. But yes, I mean, you upload, and when you click upload, start submission, it'll spin around, and then another window will pop up, and hopefully it'll be a list of students and a couple of columns. And hopefully you won't see any red numbers in any of the columns, but if you do, that means they found errors. And you can click the student's name to see what the errors are. But whatever they are, I'm like, take note or print them out so that you could actually stop and go back to your database separate from the website, fix it there, and then upload, repeat the process until you get through that. I mean, you can fix them online. I just don't want you to be surprised later on when you're like, wait a minute, I know I fixed this. Why is it coming back to haunt me? Because you fixed it online, but you didn't fix it in your database. So it's going to stay wrong in your database. Okay. One last plug for if you all are out there, if anyone needs any additional information, like some of you or assistance, some of y'all that are brand new, I want to let you know before we log off that we do provide those services. If I can get this to come up. We provide those services under, you can go to our shop on our website, and under shop, we do provide APR assistance here. You can just learn more about it here, and it tells you how to schedule that assistance. And it's considered professional development, it's training. So it's an allowable cost. You can pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. And it tells you how to do that, and it gives you a link so you can schedule when you're available. We do have evening and weekend hours that we're opening up so we can get this done with you, for you, whatever you need. Thank you for that. Yeah, thanks for putting that information in there. And I thank you all so much for joining me as we go through this.